So welcome back to Third Age Reforged, and first of all, good news, my microphone is not as broken as I first thought, so I am now going to be able to use it again. And also, even better news I think for some people is this is not just going to be a 1v1, this is going to be a 3v3 on Dry Lake Bed, so we're going to be seeing 6 factions in action all at once here. It's going to be a bit fast and furious, so we're going to have to be making liberal use of the slower speeds that the game has to offer. But yes, so obviously this is going to be a 3v3, but the way it's going to work is it's going to essentially be 3 separate 1v1s, because that's how testing best works and seeing how the factions work against one another. As soon as you start adding sort of two of the factions on one side ganging up on one, it kind of makes things a little bit of a corrupted result. But even so, there is going to be sort of, obviously, as the victors are decided, then they will sort of set up and regroup, and there will be one final battle at the end between everything that is left, unless of course it's a clean sweep for one side. But we'll go through all of the army compositions now, and I think we'll go through each 1v1 as they appear on the map. So we'll start off with the factions closest, and it's mine. So we're going to be having a look at Cardolan first of all, and I have to say, Cardolan, I really like playing as Cardolan. There's something about them which just sort of suits my playstyle really nicely. And we'll go through my skirmish line at the front first of all. Now, you may be noticing that these Minas Girithlin archers are facing the wrong way, but I wanted to place my stakes behind so I couldn't be rear charged, for a reason that you'll see when you notice who my opponent is. But yes, first of all we have these archers. I've got 2 units of these guys on each flank, and this was mainly so that I could have a token long-range skirmish force, both to deal with enemy foot archers or potentially, more importantly, to deal with enemy horse skirmishers. Bit of a clue as to who I'm fighting. But next up I do have 2 units of the Minas Girithlin sharpshooters as well, and again this is going to be primarily designed to repel enemy cavalry. And obviously with the stakes behind, that means the cavalry would have to charge front on into the crossbow fire, and that's going to be very bad for most cavalry units, in fact all cavalry units. None of them are going to trade efficiently when they're being shot point blank with crossbow bolts. And the Minas Girithlin sharpshooters are also very well armoured, they're a very tanky crossbow unit, so shooting them with archers is going to yield not particularly fantastic results. It's going to take a lot of archer fire to kill them, unless it's a very high tier AP archer of course. And then in the middle I do have these Manatar Romen Guardians. Now this of course is the previously known as the Foreshell Gatekeepers, and they're still essentially the same kind of unit. They are of course designed primarily to be anti-cavalry, and this of course fits in very well to what I want to do. So they are a crossbow unit, and they will also pull out those pole arms in melee, so that they can help deal with the cavalry when they run out of ammo. So they're a decent sort of mainline unit in melee as well. And actually they do have an upgrade model as well, where if you upgrade their armour they do dress themselves fully in plate rather than just the pauldrons and the helm, and that is a very cool looking model, but I did run out of money, so unfortunately I wasn't able to bring them. So that is my skirmish line here at the front, and then just in behind we have my first infantry that's going to be into the fray. I've got 3 units of the Minas Girithlin swordsmen, relatively well armoured, decent mainline unit. Of course, it's going to be fairly similar to the kind of Gondor infantries and the, what are they called now, the Edhalond men-at-arms, that sort of unit. Sort of indicative of the Kingdoms of Men, particularly the more Númenórean-based factions, and Cardolan I do believe still counters that, because they do have some Dunedain units at the high end. So yeah, 3 units of these to give my front line its rigidity. And then just in behind them I have 4 units of the Greenwatch Garrison footmen. Again, cheap pikemen. I've always been an advocate for cheap pikes. I think that they can perform very well and be very cost effective. And Cardolan, they do have a higher tier pike unit in the Wardens of Tirn Gothrad, but I decided not to bring them. I felt that the Greenwatch Garrison footmen would be a much better choice in this situation. The numbers of pikes I think will really stand me in good stead, particularly given who I'm facing. I've got 2 units of the Minas Girithlin spears, again basic spears, similar in many ways to the infantry. 1 unit of the Greenwatch Garrison spears, very good tar picks. They have got a very high shield value. They're pretty woeful in melee, but they will also give me some extra utility with regards to defending my lines from any cavalry, because they do have a small bonus versus cavalry, because of course, you know, they are spears at the end of the day. And then finally we have my 3 cavalry units. I was going to bring more cavalry, but I decided to spend a little bit more on my infantry because of who I was fighting. And over here we have the Royal Court of House Thorondor. You can see Gandalf the Grey over here actually in this unit. Gandalf the White is in one of the Gondorian cavalry units, but yeah, this is the best cavalry that Cardolan can field. Similar in many ways to the Black Serpent Bodyguard, very fast lancers, shielded, not really fantastic in sustained melee against cavalry of a similar tier and cost, but if you can keep them moving and keep them charging, they're going to do very well. And then I've got a couple of units of Dunedain commanders as well, which again is kind of like the baseline version of the Royal Court. They don't have HP like the Royal Court, but they do have more men in the unit, and they obviously can get similar sort of damage off when they charge. Having a look at my opponent, we have Nexus playing as Rohan, and Rohan, this sort of decided my strategy fairly early on. Cardlin are very good at dealing with cavalry, but I did need to go a little bit more anti-cav, so I've got a lot of pikes and a lot of crossbows. But actually he went for an army, not what I was expecting. He's gone very quantity heavy with regards to his infantry, and he's got quite a lot of cavalry as well. So at the front here, I believe he's got 5 units of the Riddermark archers. These guys are lower tier archers. Now, they're not going to do a lot of damage to the majority of my infantry units because they're relatively well armoured and shielded. But they could do a decent amount of damage to my pikes, and that could be devastating for my infantry line, particularly considering as the pikes are going to be the primary thing that are going to need to hold back this tide of infantry. So he's got a lot of Riddermark spearmen, which are they're not as good as the Edoras spears, but they are still, they're decent. They'll do the job of holding the line provided they're backed up. He's also got, however, back here some Eastmark spears, which are the even lower tier spearmen. I'm a little bit confused as to why he went so spear heavy, but with how many he has, it's going to make up for the fact they do have an infantry malice, because there are so many of them that they could potentially try to envelop my lines and get around my crossbows. Other than that, though, he does have a lot of cavalry. Over here we have some Eastmark riders, sort of basic lancers. They're not the best cavalry, but, as far as Rohan goes, they've got a lot of lancers. Over here is really the one exception to that. They have the red shield of House Erkenbrand, and this is the only horse archer melee cavalry hybrid in the game, I believe. Potentially a very potent tool, especially in the matchup he has here, because horse skirmishers could be very useful. I don't really have the most archers to answer them with, and also I can't really engage them one-to-one in melee because the red shields will be sufficient to deal with any of my cavalry units in a one-on-one fight, even my royal courts, because of the malice that lancers have. And also he has the Sons of Yorl. Again, I can't really match them one-to-one in melee. When it comes to his cavalry, I'm going to need to rely on my crossbows to really equalise the fight so that it goes a little bit better for me. And over here he has even more cavalry. So he has some Riddermark skirmishers. Potentially going to be quite difficult to use because they have lower range than the crossbow, so I'm going to sort of skirmish them down very well. But if he saves them for the late game, they could potentially be very deadly. Also, if he just keeps them behind the line and just uses them as standard javelins, trying to throw them into my heavily armoured troops at the front, he could do very well for himself. And over here he has some more Eastmark riders, and then at the back, I believe this is where his general's hanging out. Yes, it is. We have the 1st Marshal's bodyguard. This is, of course, previously known as the Rohan bodyguard. Again, very similar, multiple HP lancers. Not quite as good as the Sons of Yorl, but still faster than the Sons of Yorl at the very least. Now we shall move on to the central engagement, and for the red team we have Goddess Nimhe playing as Umbar. He's got some mercenary crossbows back here, and of course potentially very good as long as they aren't outranged too much. If they get focused down by enemy foot archers or horse skirmishers, they can drop pretty quickly, but they can also influence the cavalry fight very nicely. Over here, this may be his general's bodyguard unit, the Warlords of Umbar, very potent knight unit. Is this his general's bodyguard? No, I don't think so. The general's unit is not here. But yes, very difficult to beat these guys one-on-one. It can be done with certain cavalry units, but they are a very potent force on the field. And as we sort of move into his main line, we have a lot of Belagaya footmen. Belagir, I think. Belagaya. Again, it's one of the things like the Loka or Lok. I really should sort of figure out and nail down the pronunciation once and for all. Soon, Umbar will be getting their new unit models, of course, but for the time being, we still have the standard ones. They've never looked bad anyway. But yeah, standard spears, they're going to be doing the job that spears do. Spears are going to be much more important in the upcoming patch, and the Belagaya footmen should do a decent job at holding the front. He's also got a lot of these Belagaya archers at the front. Again, a very potent force when it comes to engaging in a skirmish battle with the enemy, which again, considering his opponent, was a pretty wise move. They aren't really what I'd call a tar pit as such, but they, with the bucklers, with the shield value, and with the decent armour, and with the relatively low cost, they can often end up paying for themselves very nicely. And then back here we have some of his more, we have the Corsair pikes, which are not elite, but pikemen, as again, they are very low tier pikemen. They're one of the cheapest pikes in the game you can buy alongside the Rudauer pikes. But again, as long as they don't get shot to death, they can be pretty potent in melee, as we've seen in the past. He's also got some Belagaya halberds over here. Again, nice anti-armour unit. Just so we don't skip over them, this is where his general's at. There's Castamere. We have the Naru Naaru Royal Guard, an AP spear unit. Potentially potent again. Not the sort of thing that cavalry wants to be engaging with. They can get their killing done quite slowly, however, so they might need to be supported. Over here we have some Abrazanim Nadu Tarek, again, AP's mainline infantry unit. Very tough, very resilient. They don't get their killing done quickly again. You know, this is a bit of a theme with Goddess Nimhein's army here. But nonetheless, they are going to be very difficult for his opponent to get rid of, particularly with the nice shield values they have. You also have some Castamir's Chosen here on the flank. They aren't multiple HP anymore, actually, the Castamir's Chosen. They've been given a similar treatment to the Guardians of Khan Doom in the fact that, you know, you're going to be seeing more of them. But obviously the trade-off for that is they're not quite as potent as they once were. The Harbingers of Castamir are still the sort of battlefield champions that they always were, however. And over here we have, again, more mercenary crossbows and some mounted Numenorian shield guard with the Umbar logo on them there. So again, this is the Umbar brought a decent cavalry force and a very balanced infantry force, and they are going to be facing off against Dale, played by Creed, the current champion of the Discord, and at the front he's got a couple of units of these Bardian marksmen with the armour upgrade. In terms of a skirmish fight, Dale are probably one of the strongest you can ask for. Again, the elves are kind of the fly in the ointment there. They will often end up winning most skirmish fights, as you may expect, but when it comes to the humans, Dale and Umbar are two of the most effective, so it's going to be interesting to see which one of them manages to win out in the skirmish fight. Obviously we have some lower tier archers as well, these Lake Town bows. You know, they aren't quite as resilient, of course, but they will still get more volume of arrows downrange. We have some mounted Earls of Dale over here, and obviously they will be able to, they are melee cavalry, so they will be able to engage in a prolonged fight with any of the Umbar cavalry that they have and trade relatively efficiently. The warlords might still be a bit of a problem for them to deal with because of how elite they are. We have some Dalian Royal Guard over here. Again, they aren't AP anymore, but they do, you know, they're obviously a very high tier archer unit, and when they pull out their swords, they're a pretty impressive tour de force as well. Again, he's gone for a lot of low tier pikes as well. The Lake Town pikemen, pretty similar in many ways to my pikes. So again, he needs to be careful that they don't get skirmished down, because Umbar has gone pretty skirmish heavy, just like Rohan has for me. But provided they get into a sustained fight, they should be relatively decent against a lot of what Umbar has, particularly the Belagaya Spearmen. And over here we have the Blackshot Dragon Slayers, of course. This is going to be a unit you're going to be seeing a lot when you face Dale, simply because they can pick their target in amongst your army and really start to make its life miserable as long as they're in range with their handheld wind lancers. And obviously they are pretty impressive in melee as well. Another unit of the Earls of Dale. On either side, as I'm sure you've noticed, he's also got some faster moving Dalian cavalry, their shock cavalry. Whether or not they have enough room to manoeuvre to actually try and get in behind the Umbar lines, I should say, remains to be seen. And then back here we have some lower tier shock troops in the Greenwood Lumbermen. We also have some Lake Town Spears, and I believe, yes indeed, we have the Girians Paladins, of course, previously known as the Dalian Paladins. Very potent AP shock troops. Going to be quite difficult for Umbar to get rid of. Umbar also do have their fair share of armoured units that they're going to need to keep away from these guys. 1-to-1, the Girians Paladins will be sufficient to beat anything that Umbar has, so they're going to need to be careful. And over here some more Lumbermen and some more Spears. So, moving on to the final matchup, we have Celtic playing as Gondor. So, I think this is the first time I've actually shown Gondor in the current patch. So we have some Pinnith Gelin cavalry. Again, pretty decent cavalry in terms of skill. If you're going to try and engage in a cavalry fight as Gondor, you're going to need to bring these guys, because the other lancers will just get absolutely wrecked. The skill that these guys have means they stand up slightly better, but they're still not going to win you the fight in the vast majority of cases. But still, very good off the charge, potentially very potent. Ooh, a full 360 there. So it looks like we've got a lot of pole arms for Gondor, as you might expect. We've got some Citadel Guard, they are AP. And obviously when you have AP spears, that's going to make life very miserable for any cavalry they might catch. In behind them, we also have some Caer Andros Swordmasters, previously known as the Winged Swordsmen. Definitely the primary damage dealers in the Gondorian line for the most part, because obviously you do have the Sons of Argonath, which actually do have a new name now, but you can only have one of them. Similar story with the Wardens of the White Tower. Actually, the Sons of Argonath are over there. Let's go and have a look at what they're called. The Elisar's Honour Guard. And actually I think this here is Boromir. Or is that Faramir? No, it's got to be Boromir, he's wearing heavy plate. So yeah, there's Elisar's Honour Guard and the Caer Andros Swordmasters. They aren't AP, neither of these units, but they are of course very, very skillful and are going to be able to do some nice damage. But obviously the AP core is over here with the Axemen of Lasarnak with their armour upgrade, giving them the Lasarnak Nobles armour from the previous patch. At the front here he's got the Guards of Osgiliath. They do need to be careful they don't get skirmished down, but in terms of quality pikes, I think this is the most quality pikeman that's on the field. They're pretty cheap for what they offer as well. You can only have 2 before the cost increases, I think, or can you have 3 now? No, that's 2. 2 units of Guards of Osgiliath. 650 apiece, very good for what they offer. Obviously, no cavalry is going to want to get within a country mile of these guys. Shielded Fountain Guard as well, another AP spear unit that Gondor have available to them, obviously significantly more expensive, but very, very resilient. And then over here I think it's going to be a similar story on this side, except we have more Cairandrel Swordmasters, another unit of Citadel Guard. I'm sure he's got a unit of Wardens of the White Tower as well, indeed he does. Very powerful sword and board unit, very much what Gondor is known for. And then over here we have more cavalry, so we have another unit of Penath Gelin cavalry. And then over here we have Gandalf the White on the field as well as Gandalf the Grey, with Gandalf's retinue bodyguard, multiple HP Lancer cavalry. Very resilient, very heavily armoured, very nice shield value. Low tier archers are barely going to scratch these guys from the front with the shields, so again, in a one-to-one cavalry fight they will struggle to trade efficiently with units of a similar cost to them though, so do be careful with them because they are a big investment. And then the final army, before we can finally get into the action as it happens, we have the Uruk-hai infantry that is being commanded, well, we have Isengard that is being commanded by Crimson Vahlit, but the Uruk-hai infantry are also being commanded by him. So they're going to be on the front line, of course, very nicely armoured. Gondor actually don't have any archers, they've gone full infantry, so this is going to be interesting to see how they deal with this. But the Uruk-hai infantry under normal circumstances would be very resilient to archers. The Uruk-hai pikemen less so, because they don't have as much of a shield value, but we saw in the previous battle between Dol Amroth and Isengard that even when they're outnumbered pike to pike, they can still perform very nicely, so definitely still going to be the core of the Isengard army here. Got some more Uruk-hai infantry in behind. We've got some chaff back here in the shape of the Dunlending clansmen. And then what do we got over here? I think it's just more pikes and more infantry. We do have some Uruk-hai archers, however. They aren't the best archers, of course. You know, they are designed in true orc fashion to just outnumber the enemy. But they can do a pretty decent amount of damage. I mean, they're not completely worthless anymore. Isengard have always historically struggled to field any sort of archer corps and be effective. Now they can do it a little bit more so against certain factions, particularly now actually that Gondor has no response to them. You know, Isengard have got the skirmish advantage for once, but of course the real Isengard ranged power comes from the Uruk-hai crossbows, very potent, going to be able to deal nicely with the vast majority of the Gondorian cavalry. And then back here we also have some Warg Riders, and I do know for a fact as well that Crimson Vahlit has also brought some Nazkai that are somewhere. Here we are. I missed, oh well, bloody hell, I missed this entire section of his army. Some Uruk-hai archers again, more clansmen, some veterans as well to pad out the line, and some more Warg Riders. Here are some Uruk-hai berserkers again. This is the primary reason why you want to bring archers against Isengard, because the Uruk-hai berserkers are such a tour de force in melee, but they do have a severe weakness to archers. And then back here we have the really expensive Champions of the White Hand, which we've seen before, and of course the fearsome Nazkai, the Folk of the Ring, and there is Saruman facing off against Gandalf. Now, it's going to be interesting to see who actually engages first in this fight, because we will go and focus in on that battle first of all. I would imagine it's going to be over here, simply because while Gondor has deployed a little bit further back, they're going to need to get into melee because they don't have any archers. And then over here you can see that I'm sort of moving into position as well. I will of course drop the speed a little bit when we get into the fight. Actually, if we have a look over here, I think actually Dale and Umbar are just out of range of one another, so they're sort of angrily looking at each other from across the field, because of course there is going to be a fairly lengthy skirmish, although I would say that Umbar do need to have some impetus to get into melee faster than Dale, simply because Dale do have the better skirmishes in this situation. They do need to be careful of the Dalian cavalry out on the flanks. You can also see that I'm starting to move forward now. Actually, I'm the first one that's being accosted by the enemy. The Riddermark archers are firing now. I wasn't expecting this amount of numbers from the Rohan infantry, so I was a little bit sort of reluctant to move in and do what I wanted to do initially, but then I thought, well, I had a look at his army and I thought this is actually a relatively low tier infantry line, so I think despite the fact I'm going to be outnumbered initially with these Minas Tirith swordsmen, if they can absorb the archer fire for my pikes and if I can get into position nicely, things should go pretty nicely, because you can see these mercenary crossbows getting dangerously close to our engagement. But even if he does try to come in from the side with his cavalry, my crossbows are going to be on hand to very quickly deal with this. Obviously, in a team-based scenario, these Warlords of Umbar would have side-charged my infantry, but it's a 3-1v1s, as I said. Now let's have a look over here. You can see these Belagaya footmen running out into loose formation. I think I will actually just slightly drop the speed, just so we can keep track of everything, because this is going to be very difficult to keep track of everything that happens. But you can see coming out in loose formation is not a bad idea, because it does mean that any cavalry charges that come into them won't do quite as much damage on contact, and of course then the spears are free to try and lay down their anti-cavalry damage. Over here you can see that Goddess Nimhai is targeting individual parts of Kree's skirmish line, and interestingly enough, he is actually targeting the Lake Town Bowmen, because they are the fragile part of the Dalian skirmish line, and it's not a bad idea, honestly, because you're not going to be able to do as much damage to the Bardian Marksman. Limit the amount of arrows that Dale can fire into you is not a bad idea. These Earls charging forth. Interestingly enough, it looks like they're going for the Mounted Numenorean Shield Guard as opposed to the Mercenary Crossbows. The Belagaea footmen are coming forward. Actually, as we move forward, we can actually see that the infantry engagement has well and truly started. I think I might actually lower the speed just a little bit more. And you can see over here that, once again, I'm doing something similar to what I did against Isengard as Dol Amroth last time, where I'm sending in an infantry unit first of all, and then rapidly backing them up with pikes, although in this situation this is much more tailored for fighting against an army like this, because the pikes will do very nicely against these lower tier spears like the Riddermark spears and the Eastmark spears. So the pikes are going to do a very good job at holding this line here. And also we have the swordsmen at the front, which are also going to do nicely. I've also managed to actually... Oh, something blew its warhorn there. But I've also managed to sort of start wrapping around, because the Rohan line did have some holes in it, which is very fortunate for me indeed. And these Greenwatch Garrison footmen and the swordsmen are going to be coming in. I'm also sending over my spearmen to both flanks to try and wrap around the infantry line. Now over here, you can actually see these Eastmark Riders going for a gap, but we'll come back to that because we have to keep track of everything. Fortunately, Isengard and Gondor haven't fully engaged yet, which is good for me. It means I can focus on 2 engagements rather than 3. The Belagaea footmen are coming in, but unfortunately for them, they have caught the Dalian Royal Guard in melee. But if one skirmisher can look after itself in melee, it's going to be the Dalian Royal Guard. Other than that, these Belagaea spears are going to have a real issue trying to get through the front of these Lake Town pikes without any sort of skirmish support. Also got some Corsair archers here, which must have been hiding. Also got these mercenary crossbows running away. These Dalian Earls shaken. They need to get out of there because of the spears and the Mounted Numenorean Shield Guard combining their forces. The Dalian cavalry also taking quite a lot of archer fire. So the Dalian cavalry struggling a little bit, although over here the Umbarim cavalry is also not having the best time of it. The Warlords of Umbar are now trapped between the Dalian cavalry and the Earls of Dale. So some mounted crossbows are probably going to need to get over here to help. Meanwhile, as we go back over to here and have a look at the cliff wall, we can see that the Eastmark Riders managed to get a charge off into my archers, but I was fine with that because that put them in the perfect position to be hit in the side by my crossbows, both my Menotar Romen Guardians and my Minas Tirithlan Sharpshooters, just laying into the side of these Eastmark Riders, and they're going to lay waste to them. They're going to break very, very quickly before they can make a significant dent into my archers. You can see actually my cavalry, I was very content to leave them in reserve. If I could save them for very late on in this fight or potentially into the next fight, I was very happy because I noticed that the front line engagement was going very nicely for me. Things were going exactly to code for me. And obviously I've also got these archers still firing in, my sharpshooters heading to the flank. My archers were actually targeting the Riddermark skirmishers for a long time, but you can also see that the Riddermark spears, they're already shaken. He doesn't have any sort of killing power on the front line which can match up to my pikes and my heavily armoured infantry. And his infantry line is going to really start to struggle. He needs to use his cavalry, he needs to be aggressive, because if things stay their course, I'm just going to be able to pin him in place and slowly bleed him, which is exactly what I want to do with the current army that I have. Meanwhile, if we have a look here in the middle, we have these Belagaea footmen facing off against these Lake Town spears. The Belagaea spears are significantly better than the lower tier Lake Town units, but they are going to be backed up by the Greenwood Lumbermen. The AP damage should really help. Amazingly, over here, the Warlords of Umbar are able to kill their way out of that situation. I think part of that is the fact that the Dalian cavalry went off in pursuit of the mercenary crossbows and left the Earls all on their own. And against a unit with HP, as we've seen in the past, that's always going to be a difficult ask. So I don't think the Earls have got multiple HP anymore, but you can have 2. Any unit that has HP, you're only going to be able to bring 1 in the vast, vast majority of cases now. And if you can bring 2, it's often a big trade-off. Over here we can see that some Lake Town River Patrol that was hiding just in behind the lines, waiting for a good target. The Abrazani Nadu Tariq would be a very good target for them, I feel. They're going to be difficult to deal with in melee. See over here, these Mounted Numenorean Shield Guard are actually being engaged by Lake Town Spears, by Blackshot Dragon Slayers and the Earls of Dale. So these Mounted Numenorean Shield Guard obviously saw the opportunity to charge into the Blackshot Dragon Slayers, but they now find themselves a little bit surrounded. The Belagaea footmen are coming forward, however, and are trying to support them. Meanwhile, over here, we'll have a look at the initial engagements between Gondor and Isengard. Gondor trying to leverage their 3 cavalry units against Isengard, but I can't help but feel as though Isengard have got a real advantage there just because they have crossbows, they've got wargs, And I think actually they've got the same number of wargs as Gondor has cavalry units. Meanwhile, this is a pretty ballsy charge from this Pinath Gelin cavalry. They're going to be able to do a significant amount of damage to these Uruk-hai archers, which in this situation, considering Gondor doesn't have any archers, it's not a bad idea, considering these archers will definitely make use of their ranged advantage to start targeting down the guards of Osgiliath later on. Meanwhile, these Dunland clansmen are also there, the champions of the White Hand, menacingly. And the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard is pulling back because Warg Riders are on the way and Chaff Spears are coming forth. Let's go back to the middle. Things are going to continue at this speed for a little while, I feel. Actually, we will up the speed just a little bit. You can see that the Corsair Pikes are trying to get into the front line because the Lake Town Pikemen have held very strong in the front here. These Spears need to get into shield wall and start pushing in if they were to have any success, and this is what they're doing over here. But the Spears are going to need to have some support if they're going to make this stick. They do have the Belagaya Halberds moving up. Umbar can afford to take these losses. They do have more infantry units on the field than Dale do. And over here you can see that the Lake Town River Patrol firing their javelins into the Abrazanim Nadu Tariq, doing a decent amount of damage there. And the Lake Town Pikes over here, still holding firm with the support of the AP damage of the Greenwood Lumbermen. That's another lethal javelin charge. Again, these are lower tier javelins, to be fair. So the Abrazanim holding themselves together reasonably well. Let's go back over to here, shall we? You can see that the Rohan archers sort of in a clump now. And at this point, I did notice that the Rohan cavalry was coming forward. He was going to try and aggressively push into my crossbows, but the crossbows, I saw that the Sons of Yorl and the Red Shields were moving, and if I can shut these guys down, this battle's pretty much all but over because of the nature of the engagement as it's going right now. He needs his cavalry to do a lot of heavy lifting because his infantry line is just being flattened by mine. And also over there you can see that I've managed to get my archers into a nice overwatch position over here. I'm actually on this little hill shooting down directly into his spears, which is causing them no end of trouble. And over here you can see that the initial engagement from the Eastmark archers, they are shaken, taking point blank fire. He did actually manage to get a decent charge off onto my Minas Tirith sharpshooters, but not enough to really affect them. Crossbows, of course, hold their effectiveness together very well unless you can kill them all off very quickly. But I did decide to move in my cavalry because I decided I couldn't be too conservative with them anymore now that he was moving forward all of his cavalry all at once. I was easily going to be able to flatten these Eastmark riders with a charge from my Dunedain commanders. Again, he's making the mistake of sort of moving his cavalry all in a blob, so I am going to be able to surround him with my Dunedain commanders over here. And also I backed up my initial charge with my Royal Court of House Thorondor, and now there is also a nice open flank in which my crossbows are free to shoot into the backs of these guys. So despite the fact that the Red Shields and the Sons of Yorl are better in melee than my cavalry, they are now outnumbered and they are taking crossbow fire in the back where their shields won't affect anything. So yeah, very nice engagement for me, and immediately this is going to send Rohan into a bit of a panic here. They only really have one healthy cav unit left, and that's the 1st Marshal's bodyguard. I mean, these 2 cav units are doing relatively well as well, but you know, I'm just mercilessly hunting them with my crossbows at this point. And Rohan doesn't really have too much of an answer for this. His infantry just wasn't good enough to make any dents in mine. And if we have a look over here, you can see that the Dalian cavalry charging into the sides of these Belagaya footmen, the Greenwood lumbermen routing, very low morale on these low tier shock troops, and the professional Umbarim infantry able to send them routing. You can see over here the Dalian cavalry with a nice charge, then pulling out their axes. They are not AP in melee anymore, but the axes still look pretty cool. You can see over here though that finally, with the support of some higher tier units like the Abrazanim and the Corsair pikemen, well, not a high tier unit but a pikeman unit nonetheless, they have managed to collapse in on the Lake Town pikemen and completely crumble the Dalian front line, and the Girions paladins had to be committed. Dale are actually looking a little bit ropey at the moment. Meanwhile, if you have a look over here, the full engagement between Isengard and Gondor is still yet to commence. Gondor is forced to be very defensive essentially because they don't have any they don't have the capacity to deal with the wargs one-to-one, which does of course mean that they are rather stuck in what they can do, because if they advance, the wargs will just start to pick them off. But with the skirmish advantage as well, Gondor is in a really tight spot here. Isengard here just sort of deciding how to deal with his prey. And then over here you can see, again back in the middle, we can see that it's a bloody engagement indeed, although the Girions paladins, while defeat is almost a certainty, they will do a lot of damage to this Umbarim infantry. The Bardian marksmen actually charging into melee. I'm not sure if they were actually out of ammo, but they needed more infantry to keep keep this line together. And you can see that the Belagire archers still have ammunition, they're still shooting. The mercenary crossbows still have ammo, and so do the Corsair archers. So Umbar starting to force Dale back a little bit. And a real problem for Dale at the moment are these Warlords of Umbar charging around in the back lines. There may only be 12 of them, but that's still a real problem. I mean, these Lake Town River Patrol need to get a javelin volley off quickly, otherwise they're going to be charged. They do get a javelin volley off, but it's only a half-hearted one. None of the Warlords actually fall. And now this River Patrol is in a very, very nasty spot. Where are the Castameres chosen, I wonder? I haven't actually seen them in this fight thus far. It might all be dead. Although I find that hard to believe. They're a very hardy infantry unit. There's the Naru Na'aru Royal Guard getting into the back lines, attacking the Dalian Royal Guard. So Umbar on top in the middle fight at the moment, I must say. But fortunately, over here, for our team, things are going very well for me against Rohan. I have now managed to completely crush his cavalry wing. His first Marshal's bodyguard, again, I just pushed my crossbows forwards a little bit more and completely destroyed them. And interestingly enough, he didn't run them away. I mean, it might look like they were killed off very, very quickly, but that was only because I focused them down with all 3 units of crossbows, and he didn't actually get them out of range. He walked them across my full firing line. Over here you can see these Riddermark archers are trying to shoot point blank. They're going to try and shoot into... Well, they're trying to shoot into my crossbows, but at this point it's far too late. I mean, the Rohan infantry just wasn't up to the task that they were given. I mean, my pikes are still relatively healthy all along the line. I mean, my infantry corps is still relatively intact. And you can see that the inexorable advance of Cardinal, and most of my units are tired, some of them are exhausted even. But now this is going to be the end for Rohan. As you see, my cavalry form up on this hillside over here. This is going to be the end. It's not often Rohan find themselves on this end of a cavalry charge. We go in. Oh, well, that just as we were about to see the charge, my Greenwatch garrison spears pull down the enemy general. And there goes the Rohan infantry line, and that's pretty much going to be it for this fight over here. So, yeah, all went very much to code for me. But as we have a look in the middle, Dale are actually managing to slowly but surely dig their way out of this central engagement. The Girians Paladins really being the linchpin here, doing a lot of heavy lifting. The Bardian marksman support in melee was absolutely crucial. Meanwhile, the Naru Na'aru Royal Guard victory seems like a certainty, but the Dalian Royal Guard really doing a good job at holding their ground. But perhaps more worryingly, the Blackshot Dragon Slayers and a lot of the Dalian archers have simply scooted back a little bit, and they are now shooting Umbar as they advance. Umbar do still have archers of their own though. It's a very close engagement here in the middle. But perhaps... Oh, hello. This is a unit I didn't realise Dale still had. They had a unit of Earls of Dale. They are shaken. But that's Rohan gone. You can see that... Well, there goes the Dalian general. Indeed, that's not great for Dale. Their morale should hold together with all of their high tier units at least. But these Earls still just sort of cycle charging backwards and forwards, trying to limit the Umbarim skirmish line. And now we finally have what looks to be the engagement, infantry engagement anyway, between Gondor and Isengard. Meanwhile over here you can see the Warg Riders trying to tangle with the Shielded Fountain Guard. That's not where they want to be. You can actually see as well over here that the Gondorian cavalry has managed to get in behind the Isengard line. That's impressive cavalry play for managing to do that. And they're going to get a charge into the back of the Dunland Clansmen, but it's not really the most imperative target to take out. Trying to sort of whittle down the numbers a little bit is all well and good, but choosing your targets is going to be important. This Pinnethgallan cavalry is over here. I no longer see Gandalf's retinue bodyguard, which is very bad for... Ah, here they are. They're in the back lines over here. They are shaken, however, because they are taking point-blank crossbow fire. We've seen how effective that can be. Admittedly, this unit is more heavily armoured and shielded than anything Rohan has, but even so, crossbows are still going to be relatively deadly, especially when they're running away with their backs to them. There goes Castamere, however, as the central engagement continues. These Girians Paladins have really done a lot of heavy lifting. They've killed an awful lot of the Umbarim infantry. Admittedly, a lot of it was spears, but even so, these Bardian marksmen also fighting the Belagire footmen. Belagire footmen being shot in the back by the Lake Town bowmen, and that should make this battle go in favour of Dale, although the Bardian marksmen are taking some of that fire as well, and they are now shaken. Umbar, though. Dalian Royal Guard, victory now seems certain, and that is because the Naru Na'aru Royal Guard, as opposed to Lake Town Bowmen, are being shot by the Dragon Slayers. So, very bad tidings for the very high tier AP Spear unit, which could well be very helpful going forwards. Look at these Girian's Paladins, look. Look how much infantry they're holding up just all on their lonesome. The rocks as well. Very much a 300 situation here. But they're really doing a good job. Obviously they are very expensive. But against heavily armoured troops like the kind Umbar are often going to be fielding, they can do a very good job indeed. Meanwhile over here we finally have the infantry clash between Gondor and Isengard. Gondor are going to struggle here because the Isengard pikes are going to be able to keep that AP damage of the Axemen of Lasarnak at arm's length. The Guards of Osgiliath would be very good going toe-to-toe with the Uruk-hai pikemen, I feel. But with the crossbows and the archers, they're not really going to have that advantage. The Gandalf's retinue bodyguard are now trapped by low-tier chaff spears and warg riders, so this is going to be the end, I feel, for Gondor's general. Actually, they're going to be able to wriggle free. That's impressive. The shielded Fountain Guard are slowly munching their way through the Isengard flank, but they are unsupported, so eventually they're going to start to drop away a little bit too sharply. And this Uruk-hai infantry as well looks like it's going to overwhelm what's left of the shielded Fountain Guard, who've been fighting for longer than the other infantry units have, I think. This Pineth Gelling cavalry is still alive, amazingly enough. All credit for Gondor for trying to make this work, because I do feel like his army pick has kind of worked against him here. The lack of archers against Isengard is a big no-no, I feel like. You're giving license to their crossbows to do as they will, and you're also giving license to their archers to have an advantage, which in the vast majority of cases they would not. Here come the shock cavalry getting into the back of the Uruk-hai infantry. Things are going relatively well actually for Gondor on this flank, but here in the middle, where the archers were targeting the Guards of Osgiliath and the pikes are dealing with the Axemen of Lasarnak, things are going pretty badly for Gondor. Their centre is starting to crumble. Ugh. Over here the Nazkai are coming forward as well. That's not a sight you want to see. Nazkai are very good against Gondor. That AP damage they do is lethal. Pineth Gelling cavalry trying to get out of range. Isengard has actually been keeping one of his wargs back in reserve all this time, in a similar fashion to I was trying to do with my cavalry, but he is now sending them forward. Well, actually they are winded, so I guess they have been moving around. It looked like he had only just activated them. But the wargs, it looks like they're going to try and engage the Pineth Gelling cavalry in melee, and they are going to get... that's going to get one of them. Going to get a banner carrier. Let's head back to the middle engagement, because this is interesting, because Isengard and me, it looks like we're going to win pretty substantially on both our flanks. Who's going to give their team the advantage, though, with the victory in the middle? Again, Umbar still have the numbers by the looks of things. Again, a lot of these Balagai are archers, but the Dalian Royal Guard is just standing firm, and they are now only fighting Balagai archers in melee. And they're definitely not the same sort of prospect as the Naru Na'aru were, although the Corsair archers are now going to try and fire point blank into the side of them, which is not a bad plan, honestly. They're not routing, are they? No. Are they going to try and leave? Do they still have ammunition? The Girian's Paladins have finally fallen, however, but they held up the Umbar army for a long time. I don't know what happened to the Castamir's Chosen. I assume they must have been charged. I mean, are there any... yeah, there's... well... what's going on over there? Balagai footman. These Lake Town Spears are coming back to the fight. Yeah, I don't know what happened to the Castamir's Chosen. I mean, there was only one unit of them, I think, but even so. You can see here the Corsair Archers and the Corsair Pikemen. The filthy pirates getting into melee. But they are only going up against sort of the men of Lake Town. So it's not like either one of these units is a shining beacon of quality. These Daily Mirror got again a similar situation here. I feel as though Umbar would be much better served by not blobbing like this around an elite unit, because these elite units are going to make you pay so dearly for that, and it does look like that's what he's trying to do now. He's trying to get in and around with what's left of his Abrazani Nadu Tarek and his Balagai halberds. Might be sufficient to overwhelm these Blackshot Dragon Slayers, especially with that ranged fire coming in from the Balagai archers. More Nadu Tarek coming back. Every little helps in this middle engagement. These Lake Town Spears are wavering once again. And again, in the face of more professional units like the Balagai footmen, the Lake Town Spears are not going to have an advantage. There's more spears over here. I think a key to this is going to be whether or not Dale have what it takes to really grind this victory out. because Umbar definitely have the numbers advantage. However, the Dragon Slayer is standing firm in the face of the Abrazanim, and they're wavering now. Wavering and exhausted, so potentially with some rear shots and those Bardian marksmen, that will send them routing. Meanwhile, what's going on over here? You can see that the Gondor line is starting to look a little bit jagged, and they are now being rear-charged by champions of the White Hand. That's a nightmare scenario for Gondor at this point. These Uruk-hai infantry have managed to push through. They're going to be going up against these Caer Andros swordsmen and the Citadel Guard. Very potent combination of AP spears and skillful two-hander swordsmen. But ultimately they're not going to have the numbers here because they are going to be surrounded by the Uruk-hai infantry and the Dunlanders. Over here I think finally the Gondorian cavalry is being worn down. I mean, it has been a pretty good showing of cavalry prowess here from Celtic, but ultimately the Gondorian cavalry is ultimately very difficult to use, especially in this situation when you've got to deal with crossbows and wargs and pikes. I mean, you've got to really pick your targets and go for them, but ultimately his cavalry... I mean, he definitely needed archers in this situation, that much is clear. But oh dear. A rear charge from the champions of the White Hand. The Elisar's Honour Guard trying to get a counter charge off, but ultimately they are but an infantry unit going up against a heavily armoured, very angry wolf carrying a very elite Uruk-hai. I was going to say Nazkai. Well, I guess they are Nazkai. They're kind of mounted Nazkai, aren't they? But yeah, the Elisar's Honour Guard taking a huge amount of casualties there. The Caer Andros Swordmasters and the Citadel Guard on this flank, again, doing relatively well. But the Uruk-hai Berserkers, with their AP damage, able to really knock away at those Citadel Guard. And of course, without armour, the Citadel Guard's AP bonus is not coming into effect. The Gondor infantry trying its best here, but ultimately they're going to be overwhelmed here. The Wardens of the White Tower. Actually, the Elisar's Honour Guard here this is a very bold move. I mean, they could be swept away in a single charge by the champions of the White Hand. Actually, you can see over here, this is where Isengard are truly winning the fight, because they're collapsing over the Gondor lines. Meanwhile, we will go back to the middle, because that is where the action is to be had. And you may notice that obviously I would be coming to the aid of my allies if it wasn't 1v1s, but I have just set out my army, and I'm waiting for the second battle to begin, because the battle will be between looking like me and Isengard, and then whoever wins this battle here in the middle will join their ally, which at the moment, I mean, it was looking like it would be Umbar, but at this point, I mean, this is a bit of a misplay over here, because there were these Belagaya footmen over here which were just sat here doing nothing for quite a long time. And they needed to be in the fight, because Umbar need to leverage their numbers, because these Blackshot Dragon Slayers, able to see off the Nadu Tariq with the help of the range support of those Bardian marksmen. And then over here we can see that the Corsair Archers trying to shoot. But again, if there's one fight that the Lake Town Bowmen can win, it's against the Corsair Archers. A true wet noodle contest indeed. And then over here we have the Dalian Royal Guard. Still victory seems certain for them. They've done an immense job, them and the Girions Paladins, of really tying the Dalian infantry line together very, very well. And again, I feel like this battle honestly was there for Umbar to win at one point, because Dale's line, when their pikemen started to falter, things were looking very bad for Dale, but ultimately they were able to regroup and use their skirmishers. They were able to pull them back, and like they're doing now, they're still doing it with these Bardian marksmen, shooting into the backs of these Belagaya footmen, supporting the Blackshot Dragon Slayers. These Nadu Tariq are in melee as well. But yeah, very, very close fight between Umbar and Dale, and it is a very interesting matchup. Both factions are very well armoured. Dale have got the slight skirmish advantage, Umbar have got the slight infantry advantage. Both have got decent cavalry in different ways. Both of them have got access to the mercenaries. Actually, no, Dale don't, do they? No, they don't. Of course they don't. But Umbar do, and that gives them their melee cavalry. Finally, these Belagaya footmen over here are coming in, but it's going to be too late, I feel like. I mean, this is a big blob of Belagaya archers here in the middle. Umbar might still be able to pull this off, but it's going to be very close. Have a look over here. You can see the Pinnithgelen cavalry still charging. I mean, that is a kamikaze charge into the pikemen there. Getting a few of the pikemen down, but I guess he doesn't really have any other answers to the pikes other than to try and rear-charge them. I mean, at this point, Gondor, I think, is just going for as many kills as he can. These Axemen of Lasarnak are shaken here. Excuse me. My voice is going. Shaken here in the middle. Over here we have the Caer Andros Swordmasters. They did pretty well in this battle, I feel like, along with the Citadel Guard. at holding the flanks. Definitely better than the centre of Gondor did. Get a full face of that palm tree there. These Warg Riders are right here as well. I think the Warg Riders cause fear. Certainly the Champions of the White Hand do, wherever they may be. Actually, the Champions of the White Hand have been pretty given a pretty big beating. I wonder what did that. Where's the Elisar's Honour Guard? I mean, it might have been them. They aren't there anymore. What's this? There's Saruman. Safe in the knowledge that he has overcome Gandalf the White. Another rear charge coming in from the Champions of the White Hand, though. And when things get down to the nitty-gritty like this, when the unit counts are getting smaller, even a unit of 6 high-tier mounted units are going to be able to do a decent amount of damage off the charge. And indeed, it's enough to send these Axemen of the Sarnak routing as these pikes shimmy their way forwards. And these Wargs are going to get up and around the flank as well. The last stand of Gondor. Meanwhile, over here, it's the last stand of both Umbar and Dale in different places here. These Bardian marksmen shooting point blank again into the backs of these Belagair archers. The way Creed used his skirmishers in this battle was very wise, because he has ammunition now where Umbar does not. Umbar were not really able to get the best shots onto Dale, despite the fact they did have a lot of Belagair archers into the late game, which were relatively undamaged, it must be said. There aren't many of these Royal Guardsmen left alive, though. The Royal Guard need to hold just a little bit longer. I mean, it says victory seems certain. Is that a break? No. Belagair archers need to be real careful. I mean, over here, what's going on? Ah, the Lake Town bowmen lost. And now the Corsair archers are reloading. Will that be the key? Will the Corsairs be the heroes for once in their lives? They're trying to get as many shots as they can into the Bardian marksmen, but needless to say, the Bardian marksmen are going to be very resilient to this kind of very low-tier archer fire. Looks like they're trying to cycle charge with these Belagair archers and get some charge damage, but needless to say, foot archers don't really have the highest charge bonus, so I think you'd be better served just leaving them in melee, to be honest. Here's the Castamir's Chosen. All 2 of them. Yeah, because you do take casualties when you try and retreat from the fight, so the charge damage you're going to get on, particularly on a high tier unit like this, is not really going to be worth it. Over here we have the Blackshot Dragon Slayers munching their way through these Umbarim spears, which they've done a really good job of so far in this fight. Again, the Dalian high tiers have really performed very, very well. Without them, they certainly would have, the Dalian army certainly would have collapsed a long time ago under the weight of the Umbarim advance. Here you can see the Dalian Royal Guard. Victory still seems certain. And the Corsair pikes finally being put to the arrow. Bardian marksmen still have ammunition. I really love this upgraded model of the Bardian marksman. The heavy lamella. Shooting again into the sides of these Belagair archers, and they're just being knocked down. And this is going to be the end, I think. They are wavering in the face of the Dalian Royal Guard. And the Dalian Royal Guard are going to be victorious against all odds over here. Let's have a look at what's going on over here, though, because Gondor, this is it. This is the last stand of Gondor. The Wardens of the White Tower surrounded on all sides by pikes and spears. Trying their best, but ultimately they will be dealt with. I think that's it for Gondor as well. And those Kerandrel Swordmasters are routing, so yeah, this is it for Gondor. Saruman victorious over Gandalf. So here is where the engagement will be discovered. Well, the engagement will be decided here in the middle very shortly, and I think it's going to be Dale. They've managed to weather the storm. And these Corsair archers are now being shot by the Bardian marksmen, and needless to say, in a skirmish fight there's only going to be one victor there. And in melee as well, Umbar just don't have enough left. I mean, they had the numbers advantage in melee for so long, but they weren't really able to leverage it. I think they should have made more use of the surrounding, because they did that with the Lake Town pikemen. And the Lake Town pikes crumbled beneath the weight of the Umbar advance, and it was then that Umbar needed to just follow through, and that would have been the victory for Umbar. But as it is now, oof, that banner carrier ruthlessly cut down by the Royal Guardsmen. And again, stuff like this, I mean, it is only 2 units now, so it isn't going to be as important, but leaving those individual units off to the side when he really needed them, because then he would have been able to overwhelm them with sheer weight of numbers. Belagair footmen trying to get into melee as much as possible with these Blackshot Dragon Slayers, and now I think is the time where we can safely go up to full speed. I really like the fact they use Wind Lances now as their bows. The Castamir's Chosen getting in, managing to kill another Dragon Slayer, and every little helps at this point, because even though Umbar probably won't win this fight, the more kills they can get, And those Casimir shows are actually getting several kills on the Blackshot Dragon Slayers. The more kills they get, the less Dalian forces are going to be able to reinforce my army, which is menacingly there over on the hill. And over here, the Bardian Marksmen, I think they are finally out of ammunition. Dalian Royal Guard going to be victorious. Axemen of the Sarnak routing through the lines over here. But yes, the Bardian Marksmen are now going to recharge the Belagaya Footmen. And this is really the final act for Umbar in this fight, but a really very good fight here in the middle by Dale and Umbar. Both armies are just left in tatters. I mean, Dale... Oh dear. What an end that was. Surrounded by filthy Uruk-hai and Dunlanders. But yeah, I mean, Dale are victorious, but it's scarcely a victory with how much of their army is gone. There go the Belagaya Footmen routing. And these Belagaya archers, these 4 Belagaya archers, the only ones left alive, with their bucklers and short swords. Oh, the Corsair archers are still alive as well, in melee.
The enemy army frees the field. Pursue
Yep, that's it. They routed. So Umbar losing just to Dale. Very close fight here in the middle. On the 2 flanks, obviously you can see, I don't think I actually completely lost a single unit, but then again, I don't think Isengard did either, maybe 1 unit at most. So, interesting symmetry to this. Will the Dalian victory in those few units end up being the deciding factor here? If we have a look at the percentages of kills, we are significantly ahead, and I think this is because despite the fact that Gondor were always on the back foot, they did at least manage to kill more of the Isengard army than Rohan were able to kill of mine. But actually we'll go up to time 6 because it's just a bunch of manoeuvring for the time being of both our armies getting into position. So we're going to meet in this sort of river portion of the dry lake bed, 2 players admitting defeat of course. Just sort of reforming my army into a similar formation as I did before with the swordsmen. Well, the swordsmen are going to be at the front, the pikes in behind them, the archers on the 2 flanks, and then the crossbows in the middle. And then just in behind them, the Greenwatch Garrison spearmen will go where they are needed. And also I still have all 3 units of my cavalry, but so does... Well, I guess Crimson doesn't. I mean, he does have 6 champions of the White Hand, but they're certainly not in as good a condition as my cavalry. But the wargs could still do a very nice amount of damage to my cavalry, so I do need to be very, very careful of them. I'm just sending them forward again. I can afford to be a little bit risky and sort of try and bait a charge from the wargs into my swordsmen, because if they do, they're going to get slaughtered by the crossbows on the approach. Over here you can see I'm just pulling my spearmen out to the flank. Dale are now regrouping with me with what very little they have. I think it's a unit of Bardian Marksmen and Blackshot Dragon Slayers only. As you can see, I'm just sort of slowly scooting forward because I do need to be careful here, because Isengard do have the tools to make my army hurt quite a lot. The wargs, if they charge into my cavalry, and portions of my infantry could do a lot of damage. My pikes are no match for the Uruk-hai pikemen. And also he has crossbows of his own, which could very quickly put paid to my numbers advantage. He has his clansmen at the front here. I actually started to try and put pressure on his wargs with my archers. Again, it was only 1 or 2 volleys before they're going up, so again, just a little bit of a manoeuvre. And I will spoil the fact that eventually I decide to just throw caution to the wind and charge up the hill into Isengard, although admittedly not before some trickery out here on the flank. So now I think we can safely go back down to 1 speed because things are going to be happening. The Warg Riders are coming in. But I decide to just pull back, and I think he realises that in melee he's got a significant advantage over all of my units, except maybe the Royal Court. But I'm going to send out my Menatar Romen Guardians over here to the flank, and picking my targets with my crossbows is still going to be the name of the game here, and I'm more than happy to make the Warg Riders the target of my affections, because that will make my Lancer Cavalry that much more potent. So I do decide to charge in my Royal Court to pin the Wargs in place. And now you can see the crossbow bolts are coming in. Bit of friendly fire is always a bit of a risk. But I'm also going to get my Dunedain commanders here. And you can see already the Warg Riders are shaken and wavering from the charges and the crossbow bolts. It really is a very potent combination that Cardland are able to wield. They are I have noticed they are a very decent cavalry faction, but just not in the traditional sense. Not in the same way that Rohan or Khand are.
Like this, we will smash the enemy.
Or, for example, the Warg factions are, like Isengard or Gundabad, or even someone like what was I about to say? What faction was it? Oh yeah, Rune with their heavy cataphracts. Different from that. Very much reliant on your foot-based units working in tandem, particularly your crossbows. because again, Cardolin's crossbows, I think this is the finest crossbow unit in the game, these Guardians over here, the Gatekeepers. Because charging cavalry into them to try and silence them in melee is not the best idea either because of those bill hooks they have. More Warg Riders are coming over. He's got his Dunland Clansmen out here on the flank. My cavalry did take some decent losses from that. My Dunedain Commanders took some losses, but it was mostly his Wargs. I mean, you see, that was an almost completely healthy unit of Wargs cut down to an only 17 strong. I'm also sending over my Sharpshooters onto this flank because he's got all of his Wargs over here now. So I'm only going to have one unit of crossbows on this flank, and now the advance is going to begin, the inexorable advance of Cardolin, the Greenwatch Garrison footmen working in tandem with the Miniskirthlin swordsmen and spears out on the flanks to really pressure the front line of Isengard. Let's have a look over here. He does have his full war contingent. He does now have some Dunland Clansmen backing them up. Not exactly the most fearsome spear unit, but it's some chaff nonetheless. And I do still have my own chaff back there, my Greenwatch Garrison spears. But again, I'm just sort of setting up the firing line. It's going to be the Somme all over again as the infantry starts to move forth. Because I actually ran out of archer ammunition quicker than he did. So I was quite content to try and skirmish down his archers. But I ran out of ammunition, so I just decided, screw it. We're going to move forward. He actually sent out his Dunland Clansmen a little bit isolated, so I decided to charge in my Dunedain Commanders. And of course, this is not really where a low-tier militia unit wants to be at. They do have a bonus versus cavalry, I think, but horrendous damage, and they break almost immediately. I'm also sending out my archers over here, and immediately my crossbows are going to start firing in to the Wargs. Dunedain Commanders, and again, that unit of relatively healthy Wargs immediately taking huge damage from my crossbows. And this is the luxury I had because I did have the numbers advantage. My Dunedain Commanders charging into the crossbows because he does have crossbows of his own, and he managed to get well, he didn't actually manage to get a volley off, but he was doing some significant damage to some of my units on the approach with these crossbows. But it's just the fact that I have more of my crossbows remaining. I do have Gondor to thank for that. With his tricksy cavalry play, he did manage to weaken the Isengard army enough that it looks like we're going to win. Dale, of course, still have those reserves as well. My Sharpshooters are still here. But the front line engagement should honestly be Isengard's to lose, because my swordsmen, they're shaken and exhausted. They're actually wavering amazingly. But my pikes are not going to be enough to break through this Uruk-hai formation. It's definitely going to be from the flanks that I'm going to have to win this. Champions of the White Hand, but you can see that the Wargs are now routing and broken. My cavalry is going to come into its own here. Let's have a look over here then at the frontline engagement. And my swordsmen actually rout, so to be fair, I did have them try and do that to both a Rohan and an Isengard army. So at this point they've just had enough. They want to go home, and that's fair enough. My pikes should be enough to at least hold the Isengard army in place for long enough for me to do what I want. And I do have these Greenwatch Garrison spears to commit to the front line as well, should I need to. They're obviously pretty trash in melee, but I'm just looking for a meat shield at most over here. Meanwhile, Dale and myself going around the flanks with Sharpshooters, Spears, Bardian Marksmen, Blackshot Dragon Slayers, and my Dunedain. You might have noticed the Warhorn as well for Cardolin is slightly different. Most factions are going to have their own Warhorns now as well, like Harad and Rune. Cardolin also have their own as well now, so it's going to be neat. You can see over here that my archers managing to get up and around the flank, but they are going to find themselves engaged in melee with the Nazkai, which is, needless to say, not a fight they're going to win. They immediately get shaken. The Nazkai can tank out an incredible amount of damage. I mean, it's not completely beyond the realms of possibility that Isengard can pull this back, because you can see that despite the numbers advantage I have, the Isengard forces are of higher quality, and several of my footmen are just going to rout. But I do still, of course, have my crossbows, which I'm immediately going to target the Uruk-hai pikes. Here in the middle as well, where Dale was able to support my advance and where we wrapped around the flank a little bit more vigorously, I was able to get a rear charge by with my Dunedain Commanders, sending a lot of the Isengard forces routing. The Isengard crossbows, however, coming in. There goes the Isengard General, following a charge from my Dunedain Commanders. And the Royal Court of House Thorondor being targeted by the crossbows. You can see several of them falling, being given a taste of my own medicine here, but fortunately for me, the Uruk-hai crossbows are not like the Guardians. They do not have the pole arms in melee, so I'm just going to charge them down as quickly as I possibly can. I think Gandalf might actually be dead. Alas, he is. With the Dragoon commanders, and again, routing those Uruk-hai. The pikes are coming in. I think my Guardians are now actually out of ammunition, so I'm sending them forwards. Very cool looking unit. And they're going to have to take on the Nazkai. Now, the Nazkai will very quickly carve their way through a unit like the Manatar Romen Guardians. But all I need to do is hold them in place, because we're winning in other sections of the line. We're going to be able to pull across. Over here you can see that these Spearmen victory is a distinct possibility. Overwhelming with sheer numbers the Uruk-hai infantry. Normally they would beat these spears in melee, but there aren't enough of them anymore. The pikes are trying to get into formation. But still, Creed is still alive. The Dalian Royal Guards still have ammunition as well. Oh, hello. And that is a rear charge into the Uruk-hai infantry. The only truly vulnerable unit that Isengard have left to such things. Getting a nice layered cavalry charge in there, forcing the Uruk-hai to break. I was initially going to charge into the Nazkai, and I think I couldn't quite make up my mind there because the pikes were on the way. But the pikes were routing, so I needn't have feared. And now this is it. Giving Isengard a taste of his own medicine. Gondor were forced into a last stand like this, and so will he. The Bardian Marksmen of Dale, and the Cardolan. Greenwatch Garrison Footmen. My pikes were really impressive in this matchup. Against Rohan they did a really good job. But yeah, the Northmen ancestry of both Dale and Cardolan proving itself to be the best genetics in Middle-earth. And the Royal Court here going away. And my crossbows getting up onto the hill. Going to try and shoot these Nazkai. Victory is a distinct possibility for the Nazkai. Look at this. I mean, that just goes to show what a monstrous force they are in melee. Admittedly, none of the units around them are particularly fantastic, other than maybe the Blackshot Dragon Slayers, so I'm just going to shoot them. Over here, this unit of pikes actually did manage to reform, but I do have my crossbows ready there to form up the firing squad. Got my Greenwatch Garrison Spears. Ultimately, of course, the Nazkai won't win this fight. There's simply too many men of Cardolan and Dale here. You can see, however, that my Minotaur Roman Guardians had over 110 men, and they were very quickly cut down to size with the Nazkai. So it does go to show that engaging them in melee with a solid infantry unit is the way to go against this very impressive Cardolan crossbow unit. The pride and joy of the Cardolan army, in my opinion. A very powerful unit indeed. Well, let's go and have a look over here. These Minas Girithlan sharpshooters again. I don't know if they still have the distinction of being AP in melee. I think they do, because if you see they have maces. Which is a neat little thing. Obviously this does mean that their melee attack score is pretty woeful. In a similar vein to the Nurad Footman. And needless to say as well that I'm sure you noticed that most of my infantry was quite cheap. I mean, I had a lot of Greenwatch units, which fortunately for me did the trick here. You can see my cavalry charging in. The pikes do turn around though, so I scatter to the wind. But my crossbows were by far and away my most expensive units, along with my lancers. Most of my infantry was honestly just cheap stuff that I was intending to hold the enemy in place with. And it did a very good job of that. I mean, my Minas Girithlan units are not what you would call cheap. They aren't really that expensive either. Similar to the likes of Gondor infantry and the like. Well, what is going on over here? There is a single Nazkai in there somewhere. I really like Cardolan's style as well. The helms, the armour, the colour scheme as well, the greens and the browns.
Victory is ours.
And there we go.
Let it be a salve upon our wounds.
Broken Uruk-hai pikes. And we don't have a huge amount of forces left alive. I mean, Dale still have some men left. I mean, what do I have? I mean, well, to be fair, I do have 1,466 men remaining. But yeah, I mean, obviously that comes from the fact that I was able to most effectively deal with my opponent in the earlier game. I mean, Isengard were outnumbered in that final engagement. If Umbar had won that fight with Dale, maybe it would have been more even, who knows. Let's have a look at the amount of kills that my men got though, however. I mean, my Lancers, decent amount of kills for them. Again, they were sort of held back as my reserves, sort of used when necessary. My crossbows, again, that's not a huge amount of kills. I mean, you might have... I'm sure that some people will say, well, the crossbows, look how OP they were. They didn't get that many kills, though. I mean, it's not like they got over 300. I mean, these were quality kills, yes, but that's what using crossbows is all about, because you don't have much ammo anymore. I mean, They were still firing in the late game because I wasn't shooting the whole match. I was only targeting high tier cavalry units with my crossbows, and cavalry don't have the most men in the unit. So again, it was only towards the late game, and most of those kills, it must be said, were probably on Uruk-hai pikes towards the end when I was starting to mow down Isengard. But the real stars of the show were my Greenwatch Garrison footmen, my pikes. I mean, one of them got 382 kills, and that is entirely down to the fact that Rohan did not have the infantry at all to go up against my pikes. I mean, the spears that he had were low tier and then lower mid tier. Then that's not going to be enough. I mean, what he really should have done is used his archers to focus down my pikes, because I think he was trying to go for my crossbows, but ultimately my crossbows are very well armoured and shielded, and they're not going to be taking too much damage from low tier Riddermark archers, and that allowed my pikes to really get some damage done. Spears, not a lot, but then they were just there to pressure the flanks and start to really crush in on the Rohan lines, and then the Isengard lines as well at the end. Minas Tirith and archers, decent amount of kills again, similar to the crossbows. They were going after targets that they needed to. My swordsmen getting a lot of kills as well, primarily against Rohan, because they broke immediately in the face of the Isengard front line. And my Greenwatch Garrison spears, just my chaff, going where needed. Yeah, I mean, I really like Cardlin, I must say. They might even be my favourite faction in the game at the moment, just because they really suit what I like to do. In terms of my three favourite factions at the moment, I would have to say it's Cardlin, Rudauer and Imladris. They just sort of speak to me as the factions that I like to play. And an honourable mention to that would also be Dol Amroth. I also quite like them. But yeah, I mean, it was a very enjoyable 3v3, and you can see sort of the vast array of engagements. And it was actually, I think that Gondor deserves a lot of credit in this fight. Despite the fact he was quite soundly beaten by Isengard, he was able to do enough damage to his critical units in many ways. His crossbows and a lot of his infantry numbers were also thinned out nicely, and his champions of the White Hand, which could have been a real menace, and that allowed us to really overwhelm him in the end. But that middle engagement between Dale and Umbar was really vicious, very much the outstanding fight in this situation, and Dale was just able to outlast it, I think, because he was able to more wisely pick his engagements, and his skirmishes were used a little bit more effectively. But he was also quite fortunate that his elite infantry was able to sort of carry the day in many ways. That Dalian Royal Guard was still alive at the end, with only 4 unit models admittedly, but also his Girian's Paladins did very well also. So yeah, very enjoyable fight, very nice. There is actually a trailer for the new patch out now, so release must be imminent, I'm sure, and hopefully more larger scale battles like this will follow when the new patch comes out, because I know that that's what most people want to see. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.